In the previous two videos we were looking at the words nuclear and atomic and comparing their distribution in the first one and looking at some of the contributions in which they occurred in the second one. This time we're going to be looking at a single word, austerity, and notice that I've changed the dates to start somewhere near the beginning of the Second World War and taken it right through to the end of the period. That means that we can perhaps highlight some interesting peaks or troughs in the use of the word austerity to compare. I'm also highlighting in this time a different format for the layout of the data. This is the keyword in context format, which basically brings up concordance lines with the keyword, the search term that you're interested in the centre, and some left-hand data and right-hand data alongside. So this is your graph for austerity, and we're going to focus first on a smallish peak in 1955, which is around about the same size as the peak in 1980. So you could repeat what I'm going to do with 1955 with 1980 to get two sets of data that may be comparable, to see how austerity is being treated and discussed and debated at these two crucial and slightly different periods of time. So if we double click on 1955, you get the concordance lines, as you can see, with the hits in the centre, the occurrences in the centre, and with some left-hand context and some right-hand context. As with the other display, you also get member, and you can click on a member's name and be taken through to parliamentary information about that member. You also have the date, and you have the potential to download selected items. If you click on download here, instead of getting text files, individual text files of the full contribution, this time you get an Excel file with the concordance lines laid out in the Excel file, which allows you to sort them in different ways, of course. The other thing you can do is you can increase the amount of left or right context so that you can see just a little bit more of context. The value of concordance lines, of course, is in its layout. If you ask for too much context, that is slightly obscured. Here I've got a default of 10 words, but if we go to the configuration page and increase the context to, say, 20, and then double click again on 1955, you get slightly more context in that case. So that's one way that you can see more context, and the other way, of course, is clicking through to the full contribution, which is possible here just as it is in the other display. And here you can see the full contribution with the keywords somewhere highlighted down the bottom in that case. If we go back up to the concordance lines here, you'll notice that this number column here sometimes repeats numbers, and that is because in the case of these two items, for example, which are listed as number 4, they both occur in the same contribution by the same speaker, Mr. Charles Hale, so that you can search either by individual hit or by a number in a particular contribution, so all of the data is still with you. And as in the other display, you can, similarly with this little menu, you can lose, for example, left-hand context or member or date or whatever you want there, and add it back in if you wish to. At the top of this display, it tells you the number of contributions, not the number of hits, but it will also load the number of hits. This process sometimes takes a long time, so it may be not the easiest way to find the number of hits in a particular date period. If you download the concordance lines into your Excel file, you can then go back and do the whole thing again for a different date range. So you could say click on 1980 instead and do the same kind of thing, download the files into an Excel spreadsheet, and that gives you some data that you can compare, and particularly if you're interested in, say, how something, a concept like austerity, which has obviously been so big in recent years, is being used by politicians at different periods of history. So that's it for this video. In the next video I'll explain something about advanced searches.